The Colorado Avalanche have moved on to the second round of the Stanley Cup Playoffs, effectively sweeping the LA Kings. For a greater matchup ahead, they made it through only to face the Minnesota Wild. Very dynamic, very offensively punching team. Super excited to talk about this and dig into this series. We've talked a lot about the Colorado Avalanche here. Excited to dig in behind enemy lines. Here to do that, I have Jess Myers of the St. Paul Pioneer Press. Jess, thank you so much for hopping on to talk about. I'm so excited to talk about this series.
Hey, I'm happy to be here and great to be in Denver. Two trips to Dallas was plenty. Happy to cancel that flight for Game 7. And this is almost uncharted territory for the Minnesota Wild. They haven't been to the second round in 11 years. So some real excitement in Minnesota. It's crazy how hyped people can get, to get a little taste of victory for a while.
So talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, in the locker room, everybody saw those pressers and scrums and they just seemed so pumped to move on. They're like, I don't care if it's Colorado we're facing, which everybody's scared of Colorado, but it just seemed like the Wild locker room was so excited to just be moving on.
Well, we don't have time to talk about all the ramifications of the way the playoffs are structured and, the top three teams in the Western Conference. Two of them have to play each other in round one, and then, two of them have to play each other in round two. That's a whole other topic. And every time you bring that up, every time you bring that up with members of the Wild or frankly any team, it's like, hey, you're going to have to beat three good teams to win the Stanley Cup anyway, whatever it is, or four good teams, might as well play them now, all of that. But that Dallas series was a lot of fun. And, not just because Minnesota won it, but, you talk about some crazy games, a double overtime, a single overtime, one blowout, a couple close games. But there was such a sense of just relief and happiness when they got an empty net goal to seal Game 6. And it's like, oh, my goodness, we're moving on. And here was my favorite part about it. 11 years ago, the last time they had done this, 2015, they beat St. Louis in the first round in 6 games. Vladdy Tarasenko was on that St. Louis team.
Oh, my gosh. That is such a – oh, my God. Talk about full circle.
Yeah, so I asked him about that. He said, well, it's more fun to be on this side of it.
I'm sure it is, Vlad.
And, Marcus Foligno and some of these guys said, hey, we've planned a lot of year-end team parties in early May. We're sick of that. So kind of fun to be in the handshake line when you've got more games to play instead of one and done like they had been at seemingly.
I was going to say, it's nice knowing you got games ahead of you rather than, a tea time at the golf course. I'm sure that's always a motivator. Digging into, I guess, the last series and how that transitions here, you play a tough team in the Dallas Stars. And, Coach Hines talked about it after the game last night as of recording this and saying, there's a lot that translates from that series to this series in particular. You're getting maybe a tired Minnesota team that hasn't had a whole lot of time in this quick turnaround. Talk to me a little bit about what you're, seeing in that locker room as far as the preparation and how much that series actually affected them heading into that Game 1.
This is what's crazy. They played Sunday night in Game 1. They found out at 12:05 a.m. Saturday morning. It's like, oh, by the way, in about 36 hours, you need to be in Denver to play, let's face it. This is an unbelievable Avalanche team. The way they started the season, yes, they split the 4 games with Minnesota this season, but so many weapons, and they come at you in waves. And that's one thing we really saw last night in the game and after the game, players talking about, yeah, Dallas was really good, but this Colorado team is so different than Dallas. Dallas's offense is very calculated, very planned out. They down to the minute. Colorado just runs and guns. It's like the hockey version of those Lakers teams from the 1980s. They just run and gun and run and gun. And you make one little mistake at your own blue line, and all of a sudden, there's a breakaway going the other way. And we saw that last night. I wrote about this today for the Pioneer Press. Game 1 of round 1. The Wild score 6 goals and everything's great with the world. Game 1 of round 2, they score 6 goals and, oh my God, what are we going to do? This is a disaster. So talking to John Hines today after Game 1, before Game 2, they're trying to take the lessons from it. They're trying to move on. Yeah, they did score 6 goals. And keep in mind, they did that without any contributions from Kirill Kaprizov or Matt Boldy, who are their 2 most reliable sources of offense. So the thought is, if you're trying to be optimistic, if you're a Minnesota fan, You tighten up the defense a little bit. You get a little better goaltending. That was an off night by Jesper Wallstedt. I don't think there's any question. And then you start to get some contributions from your top two scorers. If for a team that scored 6 goals in the first game, things could get better. But they're going to have their hands full with this Avalanche team.
Well, and not even, I feel like it's a gradual step towards seeing the Minnesota Wild at their fullest and brightest too, because not only are you getting that lack of contribution from Matt Boldy, Kirill Kaprizov, but you guys have 2 players that you are also missing that may not be ready until game 3, if that.
Yeah, and those are big losses. Joel Eriksson Ek, in a lot of ways, is the most important player on this team. The way he's got that big body, the way he goes to the net front, the way he can win draws, really anchoring that second line between Matt Boldy and Marcus Johansson most of the season. When he's healthy, when he's switched on, he's a very, very important player. He had a weird injury in Game 6. He kind of just went down on his own, kind of smacked into the boards, left the game for a while, came back third period, gutted it out. And you could tell he was playing in some pain, but it was that was one of those moments where, hey, you're not going to miss that. You're going to have to take me off on a stretcher to get me off the ice for that one. So he gutted it out, but yeah, don't know if his availability, they had kind of hoped to have him for games 1 and 2. Turns out he didn't make the trip to Colorado, so hoping to have him back for game 3. Jonas Brodin, not quite as optimistic. He blocked a shot in game 5, second period against Dallas. They won the game, but he had to leave the game in the second period, didn't return. And Jonas Brodin is one of those guys, a great shutdown defenseman, a great penalty kill defenseman. And sadly, I like to say this, but playing defense in the NHL is one of the worst things you can do to the human body. And he pays the price for it, and you see that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's very interesting too is not only are you getting that defensive loss. Defense was one of the hardest things to come by in this game 1. And so you have to think a lot of the Avalanche players in post game and even today too said a game like that can't happen again. Or at least it's not likely, right? And so you have to think after this game 1, there's a lot to improve on. As you mentioned, Wallstedt needs to have a better game. Scott Wedgwood would like to have a better game as well, but
Absolutely.
Just defensively, these teams need to kind of pick it up more. And I imagine that's very similar conversation in the Wild locker room as it is in the Avs locker room.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, Bailey, how quickly the narrative changes. We came into game 1, those of us who cover Minnesota, and the story was special teams. Their power play wasn't very good against Dallas. Their penalty kill was a disaster against Dallas. So that's all the thought. If you straighten that out in game 1, you're going to have a chance. Well, those problems continued, and now you've got a whole other set of issues to deal with. I wrote about this today. At the poker table, they talk about a tell. It's something that'll tip the other players off to what you're doing. I went right ahead and asked Jesper Wallstedt the question last night. 8 goals scored against you. 5 of them were shot from the right faceoff circle. I think at least 3 of them were shot right from the faceoff dot. Nazem Kadri last night said, we watched a lot of video of this goalie. We scouted this guy. We had an idea of that's where to shoot. That's all of a sudden a new wrinkle. That was something that I don't think anybody had planned for. That Wallstedt was so good in round 1, and then all of a sudden, did Colorado figure out his weak spot? Did that week they had between LA and Minnesota, were they able to find his tell? And how quickly can you adjust and cover that up if you're Minnesota?
Yeah, I want to dive into that a little bit more too. And Jesper Wallstedt specifically, really strong guy. I mean, you look at how much he's stealing for the Minnesota Wild. Of course, they're giving him that help in that first series, but just talk about how wonderful he has been for this team and as far as getting through that Dallas series.
Let's go way back to the draft when he went in the first round. I can't remember what pick he was. I think 18th or something.
I don't know off the top of my head.
The 17th, let's say he was 18th. The 17th pick that year was owned by Edmonton, and they took somebody else. How badly do you think Edmonton would like to have Jesper Wallstedt?
Oh my God!
Right now? And that was a narrative all year, on Oilers social media and things like that. Like, how could we screw this up so badly? Imagine what this team would do with Jesper Wallstedt. Now, with that said, he came up the ranks kind of slowly. Last year, he started with the Iowa Wild, the minor league team for the Minnesota Wild. They play in Des Moines. He had a disastrous first couple months of the season. Couldn't stop the puck. His head was a mess. And he was very open about the fact that he went to see, a psych, counseling, things like that, to get his head straight, to get him back in the game. We nominated him for the Masterton Trophy this year because he's been so open and honest about mental health being part of the journey. Marc-Andre Fleury retired at the end of last season, so we kind of knew Wallstedt would be the backup this year. He comes in, has just an unbelievable November once he started to get some playing time. I had 4 shutouts before Christmas. Got into a great spat with the Avalanche radio guy. That was a lot of fun because this is such a fun kind of snipey rivalry between these two teams and these two fan bases.
Well, Connor McGahey is just a monster in and of itself, though. Too, I love that man to death.
Yeah, and for folks who don't know, Wallstedt, who has this celebration he does after a win where he drops down to one knee and then he kind of thrusts his stick up in the air like it's Excalibur, the sword, or something like that. And the line from Avs radio was, "This young man celebrates like he has won the Stanley Cup. He has not."
I remember. Oh my gosh, Twitter blew up over this. It was hilarious.
Right. And what was great about Wallstedt too is, young guy, 23 years old. We asked him about it and he said, "Hey, isn't this supposed to be fun?" Yeah. And brought up a really good point. He said, "Everybody who scores a goal on me gets to celebrate. Why can't I celebrate where I make a big save or when I get a win?
So
why is
valid.
that a one-way street?" Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Kind of a fun reaction by him. So yeah, he became the legit solid backup. They've invested a lot of money in Philippe Gustafsson. They gave him a long-term contract back in training camp. So, he is still maybe seen as the number one goalie, but here's where it got weird. The Wild didn't play very well in March. I called it their March malaise. And for whatever reason, Philippe Gustafsson struggled down the stretch. His last 2 starts of the regular season, he gave up 10 goals. I mean, that's just not acceptable.
Right.
And the weird part about it was when we would talk to him after games, he was oddly defiant, like, "Oh no, nothing's wrong, everything's fine." Didn't say, "I got to play better," or it didn't maybe really shoulder the burden of what was going wrong or what wasn't working for him. In the meantime, Wallstedt's playing great. He's got kind of a young swagger about him. So it seemed like maybe a controversial decision at the time to go with the young goalie, but hey, you can't fault John Hines for going with the hot hand, because it's maybe easier to start the young guy and then go back to the proven veteran if there's a problem than to go the other way around, I guess.
Well, and that's exactly the point as I was going to bring up too, is this is a goaltending tandem at one point in this past season that was rated as the best goaltending tandem in the league. That's nothing to slouch at.
And, and Wallstedt legitimately was in the conversation for Rookie of the Year at one point. His numbers dropped off a little bit. The Avalanche torched him for 5 goals in December.
It's really hard, I think, to break into that conversation when you have the kind of talent that you're getting these days in rookies. Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, no, he's been a fun story. Now, the other element with Wallstedt, all of Olympic break, all of February, into early March, we heard, "Oh yeah, he's on the trading block. Teams want Wallstedt. The Wild are going to make a big move." I mean, that was the thought. That was the biggest bargaining chip that Minnesota had in its disposal. If it was going to make a big move, it was going to make a swing for the fences move, go out and get Vincent Trocheck. That was the name that everybody talked about that was supposedly coming to Minnesota. Didn't happen. But to Bill Guerin's credit, he invested wisely. He brought in Michael McCarron, and you look at what he does on that bottom 6, centering, big body, hits, scores, all of that stuff. He had a fun feud with Matt Zuccarello early in the season when McCarron was still in Nashville. Now they're teammates. It's just so many fun stories there. And oddly enough, Bailey, I'm still hearing people say, well, come summer, if they can move Wallstedt and get, Austin Matthews or, a huge name, they're going to have to do it. I don't know if what's going on in the playoff changes that narrative now.
You talk about those big swings for the fences. The Wild did make one early in the season. I know the big narrative has already been beat to death, I'm sure, in Minnesota. But Quinn Hughes coming in changes that entire season for a Minnesota Wild team that's already doing really well. And that seems like the push from Bill Guerin and company being like, we have an actual shot at winning the Stanley Cup this year.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And Bill Guerin comes with a pedigree. He's won Stanley Cups as a player. He's won Stanley Cups as a front office person, his time in Pittsburgh. He knows what this takes. Kind of a funny moment among the Minnesota sports media after that trade was made. It was on a Friday night, and a day or two later, we're all gathering like, okay, where were you and what plans got ruined?
Yep.
That night. I
made the joke with my boyfriend. I was like, I'm going to remember where I was for this trade for the rest of my life.
Funny story. I had just gone to a Christmas choir concert with my wife. I'm on the phone with my son. We're having a nice conversation, driving in the car. We're going to dinner, and there's a pause, and my son says, Dad, you have some work to do.
What a way. Spirit, I love it.
My wife holds up the phone and says, oh my God. It's like, okay, cancel the dinner reservation, heading home.
Yep. We got to get the check, please.
Yeah. Biggest trade in Wild history. I don't think there's any question. And I mean, Bailey, you're in Denver. You know Zeeb Bouillon. He could be Quinn Hughes 5 years from now. That was maybe the shocking part, was giving up Zeeb Bouillon, because he has got so much pressure.
Such a stud.
So much promise. I went to Magnus Arena a month and a half ago, and I joked with David Carl, I can't believe they haven't put up Zeeb Bouillon's Hobie banner yet, because I still can't believe he would win the trophy for the final year that he had for DU. But that was kind of the surprising move, was moving him, just because he has so much promise. But Quinn Hughes gets here, scores a goal in his first game, 10 games into Quinn Hughes' tenure in Minnesota, and he's averaging an assist per game, something crazy like that. And he says to us after 10 games, when Brock Faber and I get on the same page, we're going to be really good. And we're thinking, oh my God, like there's another gear beyond this one. Like what we've seen already isn't really good. And crazy enough, there has been another gear. I mean, the way those two have clicked together, they both go to Milan, they bring back gold medals. Jack Hughes wins the gold medal with his overtime goal, but people forget one shift earlier, Quinn was about an inch away from ending that game.
Yep.
And, got foiled by a great glove save. So it's been just a huge, huge addition to this team. And now, of course, already Minnesota pessimistic sports fans looking a year down the road. Can you keep him? Are you going to be able to keep him in Minnesota? He becomes a free agent at the end of next season. All this talk that he wants to go to New Jersey, he'll want to play with his brothers someday. I'm of the opposite side. Why not just bring Jack Hughes to Minnesota? And
give him something else to play for. I love this.
The other bit of speculation I've heard: Jack Hughes has 3 years. Will have 3 years left on his contract. The thought among some is Quinn Hughes will sign a 3-year extension in Minnesota, and then after that contract's up, then the two brothers or the three brothers are free to go wherever they want. They live in Michigan. If they want to go be Red Wings, whatever the case may be. I think that's probably likely to happen. But tip your cap to Bill Guerin for having the guts to make this move, and it's worked out as well as anybody could have imagined so far.
Just, you and I are writers. We love a good storyline. And the biggest one coming out of this series is Quinn Hughes versus Cale Makar.
Absolutely.
I mean, how in game one, it's really exciting to see both of them get on the score sheet. But beyond what their abilities are offensively, just how excited are you to see that storyline and narrative as the series goes on?
I covered college hockey for 6-7 years prior to switching over to the NHL. So I got to cover both of these guys where they were collegians. Makar obviously won the Hobie at UMass. Although I like to point out, as a Minnesota Duluth graduate, his final college game was maybe the favorite one I saw him play, because UMB shut him out 3-0 in the national championship game. So that was a good feeling. And then, Quinn Hughes, from the moment I saw him at Michigan, was just an incredible talent. I joked last night with one of the other Minnesota writers that there has to be something done on two Michigan defensemen scoring in the same NHL playoff game, with Blankenberg getting his first goal. So cool.
Well,
cool
and Sam Malinsky getting on the board as well with his Minnesota roots. But
The other Minnesota guy on the Avalanche roster, of course, I'm biased. Brock Nelson's from my hometown, and his grandfather was my youth hockey coach. So I've known
lots
that
of
family.
different connections here. I love this. Anyway,
yeah, no, it's funny enough, and I asked Brock this yesterday, but folks in my hometown have said this is a win-win series for Warroad, Minnesota, because either the Wild get one step closer to the Stanley Cup, or Brock Nelson gets one step closer to the Stanley Cup.
His answer was so good.
Yeah. He said, I hope they're still on my side, but yeah, whatever.
Anyway, but yeah, the storyline between these two guys, I mean, you're talking about the best defenseman in the world or the second best defenseman in the world, whichever way you want to swing that.
Both guys have won Norris trophies. Both have, were college stars. Both have established themselves as NHL stars. The thing I love about watching Quinn Hughes is, some players you say he's hard to defend because you don't know what he's going to do. Quinn Hughes, everybody knows what he's going to do, and you still can't defend him. He's going to make those moves, those spin moves with the puck. He's going to change directions. He's going to walk the blue line like a tightrope. I mean, he will take the puck to where it's halfway over the blue line, where guys think he's going out of the zone to regroup, and then he'll curl back in the zone and do something crazy or hit somebody with a pass. He has been prone to turnovers. And that's maybe why he's not as much in the conversation for the Norris this year with all the great offensive things he's done. He's had some coughs this year, but the fact that he's stayed healthy and the fact that he's been just such an inspiring force on that blue line, it's been really, really fun to watch.
You talk about the abilities and the agility and dynamic nature of Quinn Hughes, and that's echoed up and down this lineup for Minnesota as well. It's something Colorado's really touched on in the locker room leading up to this series, is just how dynamic this team is, especially when compared to an LA Kings team that they faced in the first round too. Talk to me about some of these weapons. You've already mentioned Kirill Kaprizov, you mentioned Matt Boldy, but you do have guys like Matt Zuccarello and other guys up and down that forward line and even on defense that can really be high danger weapons for this team.
Zuccarello is an interesting one. He spent all those years playing in New York in that kind of harsh spotlight. He went to a Stanley Cup final with the Rangers, all of that. The chemistry he and Kaprizov have is just absolutely crazy.
So fun.
People forget now, Zuccarello missed all of October. He was injured, before training camp even started. He didn't participate in training camp. He missed all of the month of October. First 12 games of the season, the Wild won 3 of them. I mean, they were a mess in October without him. He comes back and they go on an 11-0-2 run with the chemistry that he and Kaprizov have. And you saw that in the Dallas series too. Zuccarello was injured in game 1. He had 3 assists in game 1, despite the fact that he was probably concussed. Misses the next couple games, then he comes back and all of a sudden, boom, they're clicking again. He gets a goal right away in his first game back in that series. So he is so much fun. And Bailey, you'll appreciate this too. He's a guy that doesn't like to talk after wins.
Avs have a couple of those too.
Yeah. He will take his name off the board after wins. Like, no, I'm not going to talk to the media. But after losses, you don't have to request him. He will be sitting at his locker, saying, come on, let's talk. I want to dissect this. That kind of team spokesman
role. I love this. Yeah.
Yeah. That he's kind of taken on. I do really appreciate that. It's easy to talk after wins. He's the guy who wants to be the stand up for his teammates guy after losses and have that kind of impact. So, that top line has been so much fun to watch. You've got Ryan Hartman at center, and he's such a gritty player. I joked last night, he's kind of holding on to Cale Makar, and then Makar punches him in the face, and they both get penalties. I said, yeah, okay, that makes sense. You get punched in the face, you should go to the box for that. But and hey, Avalanche social media is all over me for that one, and that's fine. That's again, that's part of the fun of this rivalry, this playoff series. I mean, that's what makes it so great. These two teams that, there's not a Broncos-Vikings rivalry, there's not a Rockies-Twins rivalry, but man, we've got a fun Avalanche-Wild rivalry.
I do think that's been really fun seeing a lot of that echoed onto social media, because the Minnesota fans give it right back too.
Absolutely.
I think it's so much fun. I want to touch on that physicality a little bit more. In looking back at some stats from the Minnesota-Dallas series, if I'm not mistaken, Minnesota led in hits for all 6 games against the Dallas Stars.
I think that's correct.
How important is that in a series against the Colorado Avalanche, who are missing a Josh Manson that's been really, their main bruiser, to put it bluntly.
Two things of note there. Yakov Trenin missed a couple games in the middle of the Dallas series. He is a huge factor in the physical play. And this is what's amazing about Yakov Trenin. Led the NHL in hits this year. Good third-line winger, played on that all-Russian line they had together for a while with Yurov in the middle and Tarasenko on the other wing. Here's what's crazy about Yakov Trenin leading the NHL in hits. You never see him in the penalty box.
No.
He has figured out perfectly where the line is, what you can't do, not to use your stick, all of those things that are going to get you sent to the penalty box. He's figured out how to not do any of those things. So that's a huge factor. And then here's the other thing you definitely saw in the Dallas series. By game 5, game 6, you saw the Stars say, okay, we don't want to get hit anymore. You saw them, maybe not going as hard into corners. You saw them maybe giving up a little early on board battles. And that's what having a line like Michael McCarron with both Folignos on the wings, or like having a Yakov Trenin, that's what those bottom 6 guys do in terms of physicality. You see that on the blue line as well. Zach Bogosian, he's had an injury-marred year, but when he's out there, he's a big body. He looks like the scariest guy in the world with that beard. He looks like, Bluto from the Popeye series. You talk to him up, he's the nicest guy in the world, but he just looks like, a terror on the ice. Middleton can play the physical game. Nobody shies away from it. So that's kind of fun to see as well.
Talk to me a little bit more about that impact of the Foligno brothers, too. That was also a really fun storyline to track during the regular season.
They had a fundraiser going back when Nick was with Chicago. And
really?
In Minnesota. They lost their mother to breast cancer. I want to say about 15 years ago. It touched my heart because I lost my mother to cancer about that time as well. They had a fundraiser going called the Foligno Face-Off. And you could join, it was online, and you could join Team Marcus or you could join Team Nick. And they asked that they both wore number 17 at the time. So they asked that you donate $17 either to Team Marcus or Team Nick. And every time they played each other, it was like, who's going to win? Who's going to raise more money? And then all of it went to cancer research, kind of a cool thing that way. Well, you want to talk about an amazing moment. Marcus was injured at the time, but we get the call, hey, by the way, they're trading for Nick Foligno. And these guys were telling me the last time they had played together on the ice in a game where they kept score was like in high school. They're about 4 years apart. They got to play together one game, but what a cool family reunion. And, Nick talks about the fact that, forget all the hockey. He got to be in Minnesota for his niece's first communion. And, the fact that, they get to see each other all the time. Their home is still, they spend a lot of time in Ontario in the summer, and they're still Buffalo guys, because their dad played there. But just the dynamic of having those two guys together is so much fun. There was a joke. They both wore 17. Well, Nick comes to Minnesota and he has to switch to 71. They
oh my gosh, yeah.
But then this was the next controversy. According to NHL rules, if you have two guys with the same name, one of them has to have their first initial. Well, Nick says, I'm too old for that crap. I'm not putting my initial on my jersey. But the determination was made because Marcus had seniority on the team. Now it has to be N Foligno on the back of 71.
That's amazing.
And Marcus gets to wear just 17 with his last name.
I love this. I love hearing the behind the scenes stuff too, but on the ice as well. They're guys who move the needle in a way, at least in my eyes, for the Minnesota Wild. You see that come out to play in their physicality during game 1.
Well, and you saw that, early on, the hit on Makar that Nick Foligno delivered. And, Makar missed almost all the first period as a result. Frankly, we're glad he's back because he's such a dynamic player, so much fun to watch. But, that's the kind of impact that they bring. And keep in mind, too, Nick, with all those years he spent in Chicago, he hasn't tasted a lot of playoff series recently either. So this is not only fun to be playing with his brother. Dive into it head first.
I like it.
Yeah. Not only fun to be playing with his brother, but to be playing in the second round is a big deal for him, too.
Jess, here at DNVR, we have a segment called our Crystal Ball segment, where we go and predict the final scores of games or final scores of series. In this case, looking at this series, how do you think it ends? In how many games? And give me a winner.
As much as I want to cover a Stanley Cup final at some point in my life, watching this Colorado team this year, they seem to me to be a team of destiny. So I will say, conservatively, I'll say Colorado in 7.
Ooh,
And
okay.
I think Minnesota finds a way back into this series after that first game. There was a lot of jokes after a 9-6 first game. Game 2 is going to be like 1-0 with or 2-0 with an empty
Get
net
all
goal
their
or something
scoring out of
crazy.
the way in game
Yeah,
1, so game 2
exactly,
can be a little
exactly.
more low event. I like this.
I mean, this is a Minnesota team. You saw it in game 1. They don't fold.
No.
They're down 3-0. They're down 4-2. They take a lead in the second period. I mean, this is a team that's not going to go away that easily. And I think they will take some lessons out of game 1 and rebound to make this a better series. But again, realistically, I mean, you look at this Colorado lineup, and there's just so many weapons. I'm not ashamed to admit my Hart Trophy vote was Nathan MacKinnon. I mean, he's just been so dynamic and so much fun. And then I'm here right after the Olympic break, and oh, by the way, we're adding Nazem Kadri to the mix. Oh, sure,
Right.
like you needed one more weapon. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so interesting to me, too, just hearing all of the similarities that both teams are drawing to each other, too. Jared Bednar, leading into the series at the end of practice a couple days ago, just went on and on about the similarities on the blue line. You have that top-end talent. You've got some of the physicality. Missing some similar guys to each other as Brodin goes out and Manson goes out. And there's just so many different similarities up and down this lineup to draw for each of these teams. So to sit there and say that this game is going to end earlier than 7 just seems like so bizarre to me.
And I too, I'm old, but I love the history. Just the first ever Minnesota Wild playoff series win back in 2003, that unbelievable Avalanche team that was coming off, trips to the Stanley Cup Finals, all that. The last shot that Patrick Waugh ever faced in his career in overtime, Andrew Burnett scores to give the Wild their first ever playoff series win.
Yep.
The one banner that hangs from the ceiling at Grand Casino Arena, the 2008 Northwest Division title that the Wild won. And then, of course, they have to play the Avalanche in round 1, and the Avalanche upset them. And that was another one of those one and dones. And then they had a great playoff series in 2018 that, again, came down to overtime in game 7. Nino Niederreiter gets the winning goal.
My boy Nino.
A lot of fun history between these two teams. And again, just a fun rivalry when you get the blood boiling a little bit between the fan bases and all that.
We've got all our coverage locked down here at DNVR Avalanche, but Jess, want to give you an opportunity for people who may want to follow the Minnesota Wild a little closely, just to kind of let them know where they can find you and all of your work.
The Pioneer Press website is twincities.com, and got a story or two every day. We've got a great team that is going to cover home and road. I'm on the road with the team as long as they go. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm on Blue Sky, Puck Myers, like hockey puck, and then MYERS. On X, I'm Jess R. Myers, JESSR MYERS. If you want to follow me there, I'm on Threads, a few different places. So yeah, and fun to, as the series go deeper, I was following all these Dallas media. Now I'm following all these Colorado media. It's fun, the new friends you make along the way, and you get to appreciate some other members of the media as well.
Absolutely, Jess. I am looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better as this series goes on. Thank you so much for coming behind enemy lines to give us a little bit of insight on the Minnesota Wild and just a little bit of friendly banter. Best of luck to you as the series goes on.
Great to talk to you, Bailey.